The toast popped, the coffee went cold, and my son called me mildew. Name's Eldon Kinsey, 67, ex-maintenance man turned walking tax write-off. The $5 scratch-off sat untouched beside my chipped mug, same one I used the day my wife died. Ever felt like the wallpaper in your own life? Tell me, when did home stop feeling like yours? The toast popped up with a clack, landing lopsided beside the chipped mug I'd pulled from the back of the cabinet. It was the same mug I used every morning, the one with a faded monthood decal and a hairline crack running down its side like a worry line. The coffee inside had gone lukewarm. Again. "You're like mildew in this house," Truitt said without looking at me. He was still scrolling his phone thumb, tapping in that rhythm that made me feel like an unwanted ad waiting to be swiped away. I didn't answer. I didn't look up. Just sat there, the crust from yesterday's toast still on the placemat. Marla had insisted on placemats, said they made things feel more intentional. Intentional. There was nothing accidental about how invisible I'd become in this house. The Oregon lottery ticket lay untouched on the table between us, its edges still crisp. $5, not even a full gallon of gas anymore. Truitt noticed it, of course. Really, dad scratchers again. He let out a sharp laugh that made B flinch. "You know those things are for idiots, right, B?" My granddaughter looked at me with wide eyes. She didn't say anything she never did when Truitt was like this, but she gently slid the toast my way. "One slice? No butter?" Marla came in then, her hair pulled back tight, lipstick already perfect, though it wasn't yet 7:30. "Sweetheart," she said to Truitt, setting her hand on his shoulder, like I was the guest at someone else's table. "He doesn't mean any harm. He's just emotionally expensive." She said it with that smile of hers, the kind that sliced without needing to raise a voice. Then she took the butter off the table. I reached for the ticket. "I thought maybe it'd be fun," I murmured. "Something to hope for." "Hope?" Truitt scoffed. At your age, the words hit harder than I expected, and maybe that's when I started filing myself away. Quietly, without a scene. I took the ticket and carefully tucked it into the long tan envelope where I kept old tax forms. That envelope had been my filing system for years. Somehow putting it in there made it feel official, like I was filing myself away too, keeping something safe even if no one asked for it. We finished breakfast in silence except for the sound of Bee's spoon in her cereal and the faint hum of the refrigerator. No one asked if I was joining them at the gas station. No one cared, but I went anyway. The Shell station on Main had a new set of posters up the big yellow numbers shouting 17 million above grinning faces of people who looked nothing like me. Marla handed the ticket to the cashier with a little laugh. "He buys one every week," she said, like I wasn't standing right there. The cashier scanned it. The machine made a sound different this time. A longer beep, a pause. "Whoa," the guy said, squinting at the screen. "Looks like a winner." Marla clapped her hands. "Don't tease." Truitt grabbed the slip the cashier printed. His eyes widened. "It says 17 million. I swear the air in the store changed. Even the humming fridge holding bottled water seemed to stop for a beat." They looked at me, then mouths already forming smiles meant for magazine covers. "I told you buying these wasn't a total waste," Truitt said, already pulling out his phone. "Did you sign it?" Marla asked, breathless. I looked down. The answer was yes, in blue ink. I'd signed it before anyone else even knew it existed. My name, my handwriting, right there. But I didn't say a word. Back at the house, they popped open sparkling cider. I stood by the sink, cardigans sagging at the elbows, watching them take selfies with the ticket. Or rather, with a copy of the ticket. I'd folded the original and slipped it into the pocket of that same cardigan. It rested against my heart like a secret. Bee came to stand beside me. "Are we rich now?" she whispered. I knelt slightly so we were eye level. "I think we've always been rich," I said, "just not in the way they count it." She nodded solemn. I hoped she wouldn't forget that. By late afternoon, I'd packed 2 bags, one with clothes, one with documents. I didn't slam a door, didn't leave a note, just opened the front door and stood there for a long minute. Behind me, I heard Marla laughing. She was telling someone on speakerphone about her new life. She didn't even know I'd left the envelope on the mantel tucked behind the ugly ceramic vase I hated. I stepped onto the porch. The cold bit at my ankles. It smelled like rain and daffodils. Let them have the party, I thought. I'll keep the proof. And I walked away from the only home I ever helped build, quietly, carefully, like you'd carry something that mattered more than people ever gave it credit for. The library didn't smell like betrayal, just old paper lemon cleaner and second chances. I stepped inside like a man stepping into church, not to be saved but to sit still. Rain clung to the shoulders of my cardigan, and the fabric tugged heavier than usual, like it had picked up more than water on the walkover. At the counter, the assistant librarian, a young woman with cropped hair and a smile that didn't pry, glanced up, nodded, and returned to her screen. She didn't ask what I was looking for. That alone made me want to come back the next day. I chose a corner table near the electrical outlet that hummed faintly. The laminate surface was chipped at the corners, and the stapler next to the printer had one leg missing. But here in this space that hadn't changed in a decade, I found something that felt suspiciously like ground beneath my feet. My flip phone buzzed once, a notification from the past, or so it felt. I opened the gallery, scrolling through blurry photos of receipts, grocery lists, and one snapshot that stopped me. The lottery ticket, unscratched, still in its newborn state. Dated, stamped, captured on that same counter at the gas station. I stared at the image like it might accuse me, but it only showed what it always had: my hand. My pen, my cardigan sleeve. Not proof, not yet, but a breadcrumb. I remembered what my late wife once told me over coffee and unpaid bills. If no one believes you, let the paper do the talking. That morning I hadn't understood what she meant. Today I folded that lesson into the crease of my thoughts. The gas station clerk looked like he hadn't shaved in a week and hadn't cared in 2. I waited until he finished bagging sunflower seeds for a teenager in a varsity jacket. Then I stepped forward, careful with my tone. Bought a ticket here, about 10 days ago, March 5th, right after 11. He tilted his head. That the day we had the power flicker, I shrugged. Might have been. I had a gray cardigan, signed the back before scratching it. He nodded slowly. We got footage. Management keeps it 2 weeks, I think. Would it show me holding it? Don't know how clear, but yeah, maybe. He scratched his jaw. You want to file something? I hesitated. No, just curious. And with that I left. But not before buying a bottled water and asking for the receipt. Back at the library, I opened a folder on the desktop labeled Truth. I uploaded the phone image. I scanned the new receipt. I created a timeline, March 5th, 11:07 a.m., $5 ATM withdrawal. 11:12 security footage exists. 11:14 scratch ticket in hand. Evidence may be slow, but it stacks. I clicked print on the photo. It came out grainy colors washed to sepia. But one thing was sharp, the name tag clipped to my shirt. E. Kinsey, barely legible, but there. Proof that I'd bought the ticket before anyone called it theirs. The printer spat another page into the tray, and I leaned back for a breath. In that quiet, I looked down at the envelope I'd brought from home. It had once held utility bills, now repurposed for artifacts. I slid the photo inside along with receipts and a sticky note I'd found under the couch this morning. It had Marla's handwriting, looping precise, clean out Dad's junk, dated March 4th. A full day before they discovered the winning ticket on the table. I read it again. I knew that tone. She hadn't meant boxes in the garage, she'd meant me. The rain had grown steadier, a rhythmic tapping on the library roof that sounded like patient applause. I looked around the room. An elderly couple sat by the magazines, their heads tilted together in silence. A retired teacher scribbled in the margins of a biography. No one looked at me. No one questioned why I was here on a Tuesday morning, scanning receipts like a man trying to build a time machine. And maybe I was. This wasn't revenge. This was reconstruction, quiet as wet leaves falling on stone. I didn't want to burn the house down. I just wanted to know it had once been mine too. I closed the folder, tucked the envelope into the folds of my coat. As I stood, the stapler wobbled slightly on its 3 legs. I steadied it. Just because something was broken didn't mean it couldn't hold things together. You're here every morning, she said, setting down a styrofoam cup. Books are good, but what are you really building? Her voice came from somewhere behind a metal cart full of magazines and discarded council agendas. but it sliced through the quiet like a violin string pulled too tight. I looked up from my usual table where the same folders lay in the same formation as the past 3 days, a paper perimeter of truth guarded by receipts and blurry photo printouts. "I'm not building," I said, "just trying not to crumble." She sat across from me, uninvited, flipping her binder open like she owned the table, maybe even the room. On the front in curling silver Sharpie were the words, "Retired, not expired." "Well, that's sad," she said, not unkindly. "But efficient. Name's Winna May Heller, 2 ends, 1 agenda." I blinked. "Eldon Kinsey? Sounds like a jazz pianist from the 40s, she nodded. "You play only with silence." That made her smile, not a broad grin, but one of those small corner twitches that hinted at 100 held-back comebacks. The archive room of the Silverton Library smelled like a forgotten era dust, warmed by weak sunlight, lemon cleaner dulled by age, and that faint electric tang of aging fluorescent lights. The ceiling creaked when it rained, and today it creaked steadily. A librarian in training brought over a chipped kettle and 2 mismatched mugs. She didn't speak, just glanced at Winna like she knew better than to interrupt. "I've seen you filing things," Winna said, sifting through one of my folders like it was a patient chart. ATM slips, time-stamped images, Oregon lottery policy printouts. "Who you proving this to the world? Or maybe just to myself?" She leaned forward. "If no one believes you, let the paper do the talking. That's what my sister used to say, ran for city council back in '98. Lost, but her FOIA request took down half the zoning board." Something in the way she said it made me feel like I was back in a war room. Only now the ammunition was paper clips and fax receipts. We worked in tandem. I showed her the still image I'd printed yesterday, me at the gas station, counter ticket in hand. You couldn't see my face clearly, but my old Safeway name tag peeked out from under my cardigan. She nodded once and pointed at the timestamp. "Cross-reference with the ATM slip. Then draft a cover letter, nothing accusatory. Just a 'Dear Oregon Lottery, please find enclosed' kind of thing." She pulled a mechanical pencil from her bun, like a magician with a dagger, and began writing on scrap paper. "I was a paralegal once," she said. Briefly, long story. I didn't ask. The statement we drafted was neutral, precise. On March 8th, I purchased a $5 Oregon scratch-off from the Shell station at Main and Willow. Enclosed are time-stamped ATM and security materials indicating chain of custody. She underlined that phrase twice. "Chain of custody sounds official," she explained. "Also implies someone else might be trying to claim what's yours." When I hesitated to add my full name, she simply said, "If you're not in the story, you won't be in the headline." "Be in the headline," I signed. By early afternoon, my inbox pinged on the public library desktop. The Oregon Lottery Office had replied. Subject claimant inquiry, ticket number 8-7E4R. "Dear Mr. Kinsey, thank you for your submission. Based on the preliminary documentation, you appear to be the registered claimant for ticket number 8N7E4R. As per policy, we require in-person verification with the signed physical ticket and valid ID." I didn't finish the rest. The screen blurred. Something in my chest unknotted, not relief exactly, but the absence of panic. Like when a power outage ends and the fridge hums again. "They believe you," Winna said behind me. "They believe the paper," I corrected. But then she handed me a phone not mine and said, "You might want to see this." I took it. Facebook was open. Marla's page. A new post, 17th darn R. Stolen by my senile father-in-law. Betrayal isn't just a feeling, it's a fact. Elder abuse, lottery lies, justice for us. A photo of her and Truett holding the oversized check beaming. Behind them in the corner of the frame, I noticed B. Not smiling, the comments were already piling in. "OMG, so sorry, Marla. Stay strong, take him to court. Old PPL think they can get away with anything." I didn't speak. Winna didn't push. She just set the phone down like a gavel. "You said you weren't building anything," she murmured. "But it looks like they're building a case." The post went viral faster than I could boil water for tea. And I boiled slowly. I sat at table 4 in the Silverton Cafe, nursing a chipped mug and a heart that hadn't beaten clean since the night I walked out with a folded envelope in my cardigan. Truett's face haunted the steam, curling above my soup smug, and startled. Marla's words still clung to my ears, like static emotionally expensive. Be Silent as Always had looked at me then, like I'd left the room and become a ghost at the kitchen table. But I wasn't dead. Not yet. The cafe buzzed around me, weather talk lunch orders, a child tapping a spoon against her juice glass. The world hadn't changed because my name had been dragged through digital mud. And maybe that was what hurt more than the post itself. 17 AM stolen by my senile father-in-law, the headline screamed right beneath a picture of Truett and Marla holding the ticket, like they'd just plucked it from heaven. My face, cropped from a family photo, appeared in the corner with the caption, "He's done this before. Ask his old job." I'd already emailed everything. The PDF was complete, 5 pages long. A scan of the original ticket before it was scratched, time-stamped, and untouched. An ATM receipt from the Sinclair station, 5 blocks from their house, $5 withdrawn at 8:02 a.m., March 4th. Security camera stills, provided by a kind manager, showing me cardigan tan slacks, and all leaning over the counter, handing a bill and receiving the ticket. And then the photo that mattered most, a blurry shot from the station's overhead feed where the outline of my old job's name tag, E. Kinsey Inventory Systems Supervisor, shimmered against my chest like a badge. I labeled the folder Truth before sending it to 3 places: the Silverton Gazette, the local news radio station, and Emily Kwan, an elder advocacy blogger from Portland, who had once written an exposé on wrongful power of attorney abuse. She responded first. "Sir, this is clear, damning, and sobering. With your permission, I'd like to write about it. I'll anonymize until you say otherwise." I wrote back, "You can use my name. It's already being dragged, might as well stand behind it." Then I shut my laptop and stared at the grilled cheese sandwich in front of me. Now lukewarm, the tomato soup skin, forming a thin, glistening film across the surface. A receipt was taped to the inside of my wallet. Now proof that felt heavier than any apology ever would. The waitress, maybe 25 now, approached cautiously. She'd once been in the 8th grade when I volunteered to speak at Career Day about logistics software. "Mr. Kinsey," she said, setting a fresh mug beside me. "You want this topped off?" I nodded. "Thanks, Darla." She smiled. "I remember you. You talked about how data was just people trying to remember themselves." I blinked. "That sounds more poetic than I meant it." She laughed. "Well, I remembered it." The cafe's tiny television in the corner switched to a local news segment. I didn't need the sound. The lower third chyron read, "Blog post on elder exploitation gains traction. Silverton man, accused of theft, responds. 5,000 shares." By the time I sipped my refill, Emily had published. The headline hit me like a thunderclap of calm. He didn't fight back. He filed everything. It wasn't vindication yet. It was just noise in the right direction. Then my phone buzzed. "Truett, Dad, we should talk. We didn't know. Let's fix this." I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered. For a second, the smell of burnt toast drifted into memory. Marla slicing silence with her butter knife. B sliding the last piece toward me without a word. Me always there, always paying. No, let them stew. Let them read. Let them feel the blinking cursor of their conscience. I folded my wallet shut, dropped a $10 on the table, and nodded once to Darla before standing. My knees ached less than my pride had, back when I let myself believe I was just the man who paid for groceries. Not anymore. Now I was the man who filed everything. While Truett and Marla smiled under a palm tree, I sat in the title office signing my name with a black gel pen and a shaking wrist. The walls here were all beige and brushed steel, like they were designed not to remember anything. But I remembered everything. The notary clicked her pen once before passing the documents once after I initialed the bottom corner. Winna sat beside me, her reading glasses pushed to her forehead, flipping the yellow folder we'd named the House Fund Trust. She didn't say much, but her presence was a steady kind of thunder, low and unwavering. "They think I'm too old to own silence," I muttered. She smiled without looking up. "They're about to find out what silence can buy." It began 3 weeks earlier when Truett posted a photo of Marla sipping a coconut drink on Waikiki Beach. Captioned, "Finally living the life we deserve." It sat atop a pile of comments, friends cheering, acquaintances jealous. They didn't know the house they left behind was no longer theirs, or maybe never was. You see, Marla never read the deed, never noticed the date it transferred to my name, March 1998, a month after her mother died. In her grief, she told me, "Don't let them ever sell this place. Keep it in the family," so I did. I just never told them which part of the family. When the lottery check cleared, I did what no one expected. I paid off the remaining mortgage-backed taxes and escrow fees. Quietly, no balloons, no champagne. Just a wire transfer and a notarized signature. And then I transferred it again. Into a trust. Managed by a nonprofit Winna had helped set up Silver Roots Foundation. Its purpose: affordable housing for the elderly residents at risk of displacement. The Maple Lane house would become the first of many. "Did you want a photo?" the realtor asked, handing me a small sign that read, "Sold." I looked at it for a long time before nodding. "Just one, for documentation." Winna snapped the picture with her old digital Canon. "No filter," she said. "Truth doesn't need one." We walked out into the chilly Oregon wind, papers in hand. Across town, a moving truck idled near Maple Lane. A man in a neon vest walked up to me and said, "Instructions say to box everything and leave it on the curb." I nodded. "They left on a Wednesday. I doubt they'll be back before Sunday." He looked unsure. "Won't this cause drama?" "Probably," I replied, opening my wallet to reveal a folded letter. Inside was a legal notification already mailed to Truett and Marla's Hawaii resort. I had tracked the location from their social media tags. But everything's above board. The envelope's seal gleamed bright yellow legal tape marked House Fund Trust, activated. At 2:34 p.m., as I sipped peppermint tea in Winna's kitchen, my phone buzzed. A photo had just gone up on Truett's profile. Him holding a snorkel, smiling. The caption, "Sun, sand, and zero stress." Below it, a comment, "Is that a moving truck in front of your house?" from @Silverton Eagle Watch. Followed by another LOL, "You better check your mail." And finally, one from Emily. "Emily Kwan, justice doesn't always scream. Sometimes it notarizes." I didn't laugh, not exactly. But I did exhale long, slow, until my lungs felt like they belonged to me again. Then I folded the deed into a separate envelope and slid it into the box marked Trust Archives. It would go to the Foundation's vault. A copy at least. The original would stay with me, just for a while. Because sometimes victory isn't loud. It's stamped, logged, certified, and delivered. "You forged this," Truett's voice cracked against the cedar-paneled walls of the church's back room. I didn't flinch. I simply opened the manila folder I had rested on the table, its edges soft from handling the flap, barely holding its shape. Everything inside was creased, coffee-stained, and meticulously numbered. Truth rarely looks new. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional echo of footsteps from the sanctuary. Pastor Green sat stiffly in a folding chair, hands clasped, lips pursed like he was preparing to officiate a funeral. And, in a way, maybe he was. Winna sat to my right, bifocals perched on the tip of her nose. Her phone discreetly propped on the table, recording everything. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Truett stood, fists clenched, his wife Marla behind him. Her makeup was flawless except for the smudge under her right eye, an eyelash that had surrendered somewhere between anger and tears. "You're destroying this family," she said, her voice trembling, as if she'd rehearsed it but forgot the second line. "No," I said quietly. "You already did when you erased mine." Pastor Green cleared his throat. "Let's keep this civil, please." Civic. That's what this whole meeting was about. This wasn't revenge, it was record-keeping. I started from the top. "This," I said, pulling the first sheet from the folder, "is the notarized gift deed transferring the house to me, signed by Rachel Kinsey, your mother, my wife, 3 years before she passed." I slid it forward. Truett refused to look. "This," I continued, "is the ATM receipt for $5 timestamped, 8:37 a.m., March 9th, 2 minutes before the camera at Lomart caught me buying the scratch-off ticket. I have a still frame as well, blurry, but the name tag from my old job is visible." I handed it to Pastor Green, who adjusted his glasses and nodded slowly. Next came the image of the ticket untouched, dated from my flip phone's camera log, then a printout of the Oregon Lottery confirmation email with my name, my address, and their request for physical verification. They received my email 3 weeks ago. You can verify that in the metadata. Truett finally stepped forward, jabbing a finger toward the folder. This means nothing. You manipulated it. You're old, you don't even know how phones work. Winna scoffed. You always were a loud kid, she muttered. Never did your homework. I kept my focus on the documents. Here's a witness affidavit from the gas station clerk. He remembers me. Said I always bought my scratchers after church with exact change. Pastor Green nodded again. He's also a deacon. Trusted man. The folder felt lighter with each page removed, yet my shoulders didn't. Not yet. Marla's eyes narrowed. So you're saying we get nothing? I looked at her. Really looked. The pearl earrings, the wristwatch she once told me cost more than my monthly pension. The empty empathy behind the eyes. I'm saying I said you weren't erased. You erased yourselves when you decided the only value I had was a name on the bottom of a grocery receipt. Truett sat down hard in the chair opposite me. He stared at the grain of the wooden table like it would rearrange itself to his favor. Pastor Green closed the folder gently. Legally and morally, he said your father is owed respect. At minimum, it was done. No shouting, no thrown chairs, just silence and paper, the kind that holds up in court and memory. Winna leaned over, whispering, "You okay?" I nodded, just tired. The next afternoon, as I returned from picking up a new roll of stamps, another habit Rachel left with me, there was a certified envelope on my porch. Inside, a notification of civil complaint filed in Truett's name, alleging elder deception and property theft. 2 pages in. Attached a stamped notice of voluntary withdrawal of said complaint effective 48 hours later. They wanted to scare me. Maybe hope I'd fold under threat. But paper doesn't scare paper. That evening I placed the envelope next to the others, not in the trash, not in a drawer. I slid it into the clear sleeve marked "Final Attempts" behind the gift deed and the blog printout. The folder still held everything creased, ink splotched, imperfect. Just like me, they didn't come back to pack, just sent movers, and the boxes looked like strangers had touched everything inside. I sat on the front steps with my old chipped coffee mug, one of the few things Marla had ever handed me with a smile. Not out of love, out of convenience, back when I was still the man who paid the heating bills and brought home the groceries. That was before the lottery ticket, before they stopped calling me Dad and started calling me a burden. Now the house on Maple Lane stood empty. The walls no longer whispered birthdays or burnt toast. My late wife's rose bushes had bloomed out of habit, but there was no one left inside who'd stop to smell them. And today I was giving it all away, not out of defeat, but because letting go this time was the most powerful thing I could do. You sure about this? Winna asked, dipping her brush in a tray of muted eggshell paint. Her sleeves were rolled up, glasses perched on her head like a tired crown. I handed her a manila folder, the design for the Quiet Claim Center, a place for financial literacy, legal help for elders, story circles for people who'd never been given a microphone but had volumes to say. She'll understand, I replied, nodding toward the upstairs bedroom. Be smarter than all of us. Winna skimmed the notes I'd penciled into the margins months ago. You sketched this before the house was even yours again. I had to imagine something kinder, I said, even when I didn't think I'd live to see it. By midsummer, the headlines had faded, the town stopped whispering, and instead of pity, I started getting volunteers. A retired electrician showed up with his toolbox. A former high school counselor offered to run debt management sessions. 2 teenagers asked if they could paint murals on the side of the house. Winna and I spent afternoons patching drywall and evenings talking about what we wished we'd done in our 40s. We drank lukewarm tea and sat on the porch watching the Oregon skies stretch themselves wide and unhurried. She posted a new welcome mat outside No Silence Here. On opening day, I didn't expect my family. But just before 9 a.m., a silver bike screeched to a stop by the gate. B. Alone. She climbed off, slowly tugging at the 2 long sleeves of her hoodie. I thought maybe you'd want this, she said, handing me my old coffee mug, the one I left behind the night I walked away. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. I didn't press her. I simply opened the door and let her in. She looked around the transformed living room, now lined with bookshelves, warm lights, and a donation box labeled "For Dignity." "This place feels different," she whispered. "It's supposed to," I said. That afternoon, after the crowd thinned and the last of the lemon bars were gone, Winna pulled an envelope from her canvas tote bag. This one had both our names printed on the front, clean and official. "It came this morning. From the state treasurer's office." I raised an eyebrow. "Looks like someone's been paying attention," she said. Inside was a letter, a community grant. Modest in money but massive in message. Recognition for exemplary elder advocacy and asset preservation for vulnerable communities. I leaned back into the armchair, the same one they'd once called my corner of clutter. It smelled like lavender and fresh paint now. They took the money, tried to take my name, but they never understood what I was really keeping. I gave away the house, but I kept the lesson. The check wasn't much. $3,000 typed on stiff cardstock, accompanied by a letter embossed with the Oregon State Treasurer's seal. But the note inside, short and handwritten, carried a weight Eldon hadn't expected. "Your program has restored dignity in silence. Thank you for making noise where it mattered." He read it twice, then placed both on the front desk of the Silverton Literacy and Asset Center. The same counter where kids once dropped overdue Goosebumps books now hosted life plans, scanned deeds, laminated ID recovery steps, and above all, patient ears. Eldon stood quietly behind a framed scratch-off ticket above his head, encased in cheap glass, but shining with improbable value. The fall leaves swirled outside like saffron-colored applause. A year had passed. Inside, folding chairs faced a podium decorated with a modest bouquet, wildflowers from Winna's garden, and 2 sunflowers from B. The Quiet Claim Initiative's first graduation ceremony wasn't grand, but it felt big. 5 elders from the community, a single father and 2 women in their 60s, who hadn't spoken in years, now seated side by side, waited for their names to be called. Not for diplomas, but for acknowledgement that they had filed what needed to be filed, said what once couldn't be said. Eldon didn't need a speechwriter. His voice was the same as always, gentle, methodical, honest. "I didn't buy revenge," he said, eyes meeting B's across the room. "I invested in memory. Not to forget what happened, but to remind ourselves what we're still capable of." A hush followed. Not silence, the good kind, the "we heard you" kind. B helped digitize the center's archive now. She was a natural. After the speech, she handed him a chipped ceramic coffee mug with a faded design that read "Number 1, Grandpa," his old mug. The one Marla had thrown out. "I found this at the back of Mom's garage," B said softly. "Thought maybe it still worked." He smiled and took it. "Still holds coffee, still holds me." Later that afternoon, Eldon found himself alone in the center's resource room, watching as Winna labeled folders with her signature fine-tip pen. She was still meticulous. Every paper, every life that walked through the door mattered to her. She hadn't missed a day since the opening. To Eldon, she was no longer just a mentor. She was the compass. "You remember when I told you they'd try to erase you?" she asked without looking up. He nodded. "They failed," she said, "and you did more than survive it. You made it unerasable." As if summoned by the wind, the front door creaked open. A man in his 30s stepped inside, wearing a jacket with a veteran's patch and holding a crumpled envelope. "Are you the man who turned a scratch-off into a sanctuary?" he asked, voice unsure, but eyes steady. Eldon stood and motioned him forward. "Have a seat," he said. "You're right on time." Behind him, the mug sat on the desk. The scratch-off gleamed in its frame. The dustcloth was folded on the podium. And somewhere outside, the wind whispered through the red oak, scattering leaves like small, stubborn truths finally allowed to land. The frame above the front desk still holds that old scratch-off ticket, faded. Now edges curled, but solid as ever. Some days, when the sun hits just right, it glints like something won and something healed. I didn't get back a family, but I built something steadier, a place where silence retires and stories begin again. Sometimes bridges collapse so we can learn which ones are worth rebuilding and who we'd let cross them. If you've ever been counted out, cast aside, or quietly rewritten, you know this truth dignity isn't loud, but it echoes. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? I'd love to hear your story or what helped you reclaim your own name.